Right. So, morning, everyone. Welcome to SAAO Weekly Thursday Colloquium. So today we have
Marsha Wolf. Meeting which is going on now.
Sorry, guys, can you please mute
You have
the microphone if you're not.
The Zoom link. Or I can forward it to you. Or you have it.
Okay. Sorry, there is somebody who's probably talking. So Marsha Wolf is senior scientist at the University of Wisconsin Madison. She's the PI of SAAO's latest instrument, the near-infrared integral field spectrograph. She's currently at Sutherland commissioning the spectrograph and probably the associated other parts of the instrument. And without much going delay into it, I'll just hand it over to Marsha. Yeah, please.
Great, thank you, Sabyasachi. So
sorry,
I'm happy to.
Yeah, just one more thing. People, you can post your questions in the chat so that we can keep a track of record. And obviously, you can ask questions at the end. Sorry about that, Marsha. Please go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. I'm happy to be able to talk to you all today from my lovely hostel room. It's a little noisy in the SALT control room, so I'm hiding out down here today to give you my talk over Zoom. So yeah, it's been exciting. We're installing and starting the commissioning of this instrument. So just to give you a brief overview of what I'm going to cover, I'll start out with a few of the instrument parameters, just so you're introduced to its capabilities a little bit. Then I'll delve a little bit into some design and construction details, and then lead into the predicted performance of the instrument, and then give you a quick current status of the installation and commissioning at SALT. All right, so this is a near-infrared spectrograph. The wavelength coverage is 800 to 1700 nanometers. Spectral resolution is 2000 to 5000. So the plot here, we're using volume phase holographic gratings, similar to what RSS has. And so one of the advantages of these type gratings is you can tune the angle to peak up the diffraction efficiency at different wavelengths. And so this plot shows the free spectral range. Each of the colored lines there is the free spectral range of the grating at different angle settings. And that shows you how the wavelength and resolution changes when you change the angle. And then the contours are the diffraction efficiency of the grating from 80% up to 30% at the edges. So we're starting out with only one grating. We designed a suite of 4 gratings to cover the entire spectral range, and that would allow you to, at a particular resolution, cover the entire range. But initially, we'll be limited to this changing spectral resolution as you change wavelength. We can add gratings later if funding is identified, so we can always add that to the instrument later. Peak instrument throughput is about 40%. Plate scale is 4.4 pixels per arcsecond. It's fiber fed, and the spatial resolution of each fiber is 5.8 pixels on the detector. So some details on the fiber. It's going to be fed by an integral field unit, and the layout of that is shown here on the right. We have a total of 212 fibers in the object IFU. Has an extent on sky of 29 arcseconds by 18. Each fiber is 1.3 arcseconds in diameter. And then we have a sky bundle that will allow us to simultaneously sample the sky. And the layout of it is shown there at the bottom. It was designed to have 38 fibers. Unfortunately, 2 were broken during construction. So we have 36 fibers in the sky bundle. And the distance between it and the object IFU is adjustable from about 49 arcseconds to 159 arcseconds. And I'll show you more details about how that's done later. So that's the quick overview of what the instrument will do. Now I'll move into a few of the design considerations that led to the configuration that we have. So with an infrared instrument, probably the number one design consideration is thermal stray light. You know, everything emits thermal radiation, even at room temperature. Things emit enough to swamp the faint astronomical signals that we're hoping to observe. So this is a big deal. And this instrument was originally designed to be up at prime focus mating to RSS-Vis. So it was even a bigger deal because we were sharing room temperature optics and everything. So one of the first things that I did was a detailed thermal stray light analysis, and that allowed us to set a bunch of design parameters and things that were going to be required. And so to do this, this is just a picture of an early incarnation of the mechanical layout of the instrument. And all these lines you see bouncing around everywhere is thermal radiation in my model. So I can set up every surface to have the correct material and temperature properties, and then they emit, and then I do a non-sequential ray trace all the way to the detector to see what thermal radiation from what sources is reaching us and how and what the levels are. And so the results of this detailed analysis were that we had to have a cutoff wavelength of 1.7 microns because the thermal emission, of course, goes up with temperature from every surface. And the entire instrument needed to be cooled to minus 40 degrees C. And then within that 40 degrees environment, we have the detector and the final couple optics, which are in a cryogenic door that needs to operate at 120 Kelvin. So that's kind of how we ended up with the instrument design. Now it's fiber fed, so this was where we ended up for the initial design, and we ended up buying a detector system with the 1.7 micron cutoff. So this is the kinds of plots that I generated to look at where we needed to be. So this is a plot of the thermal background reaching the detector in electrons per pixel. And the horizontal dashed lines here are the sky level at different spectral resolutions, 1,000 up to 7,000. And then the black lines here are read noise of the detector. And then the curves here are thermal radiation from the instrument with different material surfaces. The gold is a gold, shiny gold. Slit plate. The slit plate is the dominant source because that's what is in plain view of the camera, and different aluminum and just a black surface. So where we ended up was a temperature of minus 40 degrees, and that would put the thermal emission down below other noise sources from the sky or the detector. So that was the predicted level we would be at. All right, and this is what it looked like. So this is a picture actually installed at SALT in the spectrometer room. This is the minus 40 degree enclosure. It's a big room where and the whole thing is cooled down to minus 40 degrees with a 2 compressor series cooling system. And then this is what it looks like inside. You can see some fans, and this is part of the heat exchangers for the cooling inside. We've covered the instrument in a shroud of plexiglass on top and plastic around the edges just to prevent direct air currents from the cooling to hit the optics. And that just kind of gives it an extra barrier so that we're not blowing cold air directly on optics, just allowing them to ambiently come up to temperature. So if we look under the shroud, this is what the instrument looks like. The fibers will enter here. This cylinder is a collimator, so it sends collimated light out to a grating holder, which is behind here, and then the camera is behind there. We have a magazine of gratings or filters that can get inserted into the beam, and these are the mechanisms to insert those. So here's a view from the back. So now the fibers are entering here on the right through the collimator. This is the grating holder, and then this is the camera barrel, and the cryogenic dewar mounts directly to that. So the grating can rotate, and then the whole camera system articulates around on this rail to the proper angle for the spectrograph setup that you want. And this is the same design as RSS. And then just a view from the other side to see the inserters. This is the magazine of gratings and optics that can get inserted into their holders and the mechanisms that do that. So all of this was designed to operate at -40. Even the wires that you see here have to be special cables that stay flexible at cold temperatures because of the articulation and things moving. So it was a lot of detail to make something operate at this temperature. This is the optical design. It uses all spherical lenses. The collimator has 4, the camera has 7. The last 2 are housed within the cryogenic dewar. So the first 5 are in a barrel that mates to that. So part of the optical alignment process is getting this mating of these 2 components adjusted optically to get the lenses aligned. Then the camera has 2 elements that move for a focus of the camera. So this optical alignment is a bit of a process. So this is a picture of the first 5 lenses are in this barrel, and then the last 2 are in the cryogenic dewar, which you can't really see, but it attaches back there. It attaches through 3 kinematic points, and we can adjust. That allows us to adjust vertically, horizontally, and then piston and tip and tilt to get the optics aligned to each other sufficiently. One problem with the optical design is the gap between these 2 components is different, warm and cold. So we make an adjustment warm, and then we have to cool the entire system down to test it optically. And if we need a little more of a tweak, we have to warm the whole system up. And each of these cooling or warming cycles takes a full day. So it takes a while to get it dialed in, but we eventually get there. And then the collimator, we can adjust the pointing, the tip and tilt of it. And so what that does is basically aligns the images of the fiber spots on the detector. So by changing the pointing, how it's pointing at the camera, we can center up the spot images on the detector. So to do this process, I've developed a lot of tools. And so this is kind of the process that we go through. We take do an alignment tweak warm, cool the system down so that the optics are all at temperature. And then we take some spectra. So this is a detector image using a test and integration cable that we made. It only contains 60 fibers, but they're spread across the entire slit field of view. So that's why you only see particular spots here. That's because we only have 60 of the 250 fibers. So I go through and I pick spots that span the extent of the detector and ones that are of arc lines that aren't saturated, so we can do good measurements and that kind of thing. So the green circles denote the spots that I'm going to analyze. We go through a focus curve using that focus mechanism on the camera. And then here, each of these curves is from one of these spots showing the focus curve. And I look at where the minimum focus occurs for each spot, fit a plane to that, and then you can tell what the tip tilt of your detector plane is. And our specification is 86 microns. In the lab at Wisconsin, we were just meeting that specification. So we're not quite there yet with the reinstallation of SALT, but we're dialing it in. So we'll get there soon. And then once you get that aligned, I take a look at the delivered image quality compared to Zmax. And so this is just an example from the lab in Wisconsin, where on the left is our Zmax predicted spots, and on the right are actual measured spots on our detector for different wavelengths for a particular grading setting. So that's kind of a qualitative, does the spot shape look the same? And then the more quantitative analysis is on the right here, where I plot enclosed energy and compare that to Zmax. And the final result was the lab measured spot RMS was about 0.23 pixels larger than the optimal Zmax model. And that's without doing any Monte Carlo simulations of the alignment tolerances and stuff. So that ended up in a pretty good place. I think we'll do very similar here with the final installation of SALT. Okay, the detector system, we're using a Teledyne Hawaii 2RG 2K detector with the Teledyne cryogenic sidecar ASIC electronics board, which sits inside the Dewar right next to the detector. And then IUCA, one of our SALT partners, developed the detector controller that interfaces to that. So we have an IUCA ISDEC board, FPGA board, which sits just outside the Dewar. So it operates in the minus 40 degrees C environment. And then they wrote the control software that actually talks to the detector. We have a Python wrapper around that for collecting the observations. So infrared detectors, of course, have a lot higher read noise than CCD. So you have to take measures to beat that down. And we do that by doing multiple samples. So we'll have two different modes that are available. One is called up the ramp group, and every read is a non-destructive read. So as you're integrating, you can read it multiple times, and then you fit a slope to all of those reads and beat down the noise that would be, each image that you read would be bouncing around there. But by fitting a slope, you can beat down the noise. And then the other technique is Fowler sampling, where you do a bunch of reads at the beginning that are averaged, a bunch of reads at the end that are averaged, and you subtract the two. So we'll have both of those modes available. We have 32 readout channels, pixel sampling speed at 200 kilohertz, which gives us about a 0.7 second readout per frame. So every one of these reads that you do takes 0.72 seconds. We'll have two different operating modes, one for faint and one for bright. And those are different gain settings on the preamplifier. And these are some measured values in the lab. CDS read noise is just, one read at the beginning, one at the end. We're getting about 24 electrons in that mode. And then with the multiple sampling, you can beat that down to somewhere around 10 electrons will probably be our final read noise. We're still analyzing that data here in the SALT environment to see what that final number will be, but it'll be somewhere around 10 electrons. Okay, so we do have an issue with our detector. It's a pretty old detector at this point, and there was actually a design flaw in the Teledyne detectors of that era that allows material from the electrical contacts underneath the pixels to migrate up into the pixel material, and it degrades the operability of the pixel. So the result is these pixels have significantly higher dark current, and they saturate pretty quickly, and they have reduced dynamic range. So this shows a couple examples. 2-second exposure, you don't see too many of them showing up, but in a 600-second dark exposure, you can see a lot of hot pixels starting to show up. And this is about 11% of the detector pixels are affected by this. We're still working on whether these pixels can be calibrated and if they will be useful for scientific use. We're recommending that darks are taken with the data for the same exposure time that your science data was taken, just in case we find out that we can subtract out these bad effects. But it may turn out that these pixels are not usable, and this detector will have to be replaced in the future, unfortunately. But that's where it stands right now. Okay, we'll move on to the fiber cable. So the spectrograph is down in the spectrometer room, and we get the light to it by a fiber cable that sits up at prime focus and is routed all the way through the telescope, similar to the HRS fiber. It goes through the pencil bearing underneath the telescope and then into the spectrograph room. So this hole here is the bottom of the pintle bearing. And I don't know if you can see there's a black cable going over to the HRS enclosure over there. Our fiber cable will come over and go through a feed through in the wall of our NIR enclosure. The fiber cable is an instrument in itself. It's has been quite a process to make a 250 fiber cable that is 43 meters long. So we have a total of 256 fibers run with 6 pairs through the telescope in 4 separate protective conduits. And what you're seeing here is one of those conduits containing 64 fibers spooled up on a couple, call it the spool box. So there will be 4 of these that go up to prime focus. On the slit end, as the fibers come out, they go through a breakout box and go through a strain relief box. And so every fiber makes a loop around here before it goes through a feed through into the enclosure. And this is to give the fiber space to expand and contract. And so it needs to do that with temperature. You don't want to have it expand and break. So every fiber is in this box separated by a thick sheet of paper so that it has its own area to expand and contract as needed. So there will be 4 of these that mount to the outside of our enclosure, and then they go through a feed through the wall, and that is pictured on the right, and it's just fibers going through sandwiched between compressible rubber that forms a seal through the enclosure wall. So what you're seeing here is actually Teflon on the outside of the fibers. Every 45 meter long fiber is stuffed through a 45 meter long Teflon tube for protection through these conduits. And that was quite a process that we did out in the hallway with a 50 meter long tray and had little rubber rollers that we could crank and push the fiber through the Teflon tubes. So this has been quite a construction project. So after the fibers go into the enclosure, they go to a slit plate, and that's what it looks like for our testing integration cable. There will be 8 slit blocks along the plate. The fibers are glued into V-groove blocks that you're seeing the lids to those V-groove blocks and polished. And then each slit block is put into the right position. There's a radius of curvature on the slit. And this precision machine plate has bumps that match that radius. And so every slit block is on a little dovetail mount and is slid up to touch this plate to do a mechanical alignment first. And then we mount it onto the input of the collimator and send light through and do an optical alignment. And so, you know, in the lab on our test cable, we found that a couple of these blocks needed to be adjusted a little bit in focus, and we have the adjustment for that. So we do first mechanical alignment and then an optical alignment of both individual slit blocks and the entire slit relative to the optics. And this is part of the process of doing the integral field unit on the other end. So all 4 conduits come together, and we have the fibers coming out and being mapped from the slit plates, the slit blocks on the other side to very specific locations in the integral field unit. So this every fiber was numbered and identified during the stuffing through the Teflon tube part of the process, and then every fiber number had a specific location to go into to be put in, glued into the integral field unit and into the Sky Fiber bundle. And this is one of the undergraduates working in the lab on that, helping Joshua Opper, who's a grad student who did most of this, oversaw the entire cable construction. So the IFU gets mounted into the fiber instrument feed along with the HRS fibers, and this is a CAD model of that. So we've modified it to hold our IFU and our sky bundle. And this lower jaw moves, and that's what allows you to adjust the distance between your sky bundle and your object IFU. But we can't just move. We have to keep the bundles pointed to the correct angle to be telecentric. So that the chief ray points at the center of the pupil of the optical system. And so as the two bundles move, the mechanism tilts them to keep the center of the bundle pointed at the correct telecentric angle. And on SALT, that's quite a bit. For every arc second of field that you move out, you have to adjust the angle by 78 arc seconds. And so this mechanism does that for us. As it moves, the bundles tilt, and the FIF will be used in bisector mode where both bundles are at the same radius out from the center of the optical field of view. And so that allows you to, for each to see the same SALT vignetting and everything. And then the minimum distance is about 49 arc seconds, and the maximum is about 159 that you can have between the two bundles. However, that was the center of the bundles that we're adjusting to the telecentric angle. And because they have a fixed extent, that means that even though the center fiber will be at the exactly the right angle, you get some error at the edge fiber because it's some distance away. And so Matt Brashady did an analysis of what this is, and the histogram on the right shows that, where the colors match up to the colors of the fibers in there. So you see the fibers on the edges have the largest telecentric error, angle error. And we designed the sky bundle to match that distribution of telecentric errors. And so object fibers and sky fibers that have similar telecentricity will be positioned next to each other on a slit. And so this is all to try and maximize our ability to do sky subtraction, because in the near infrared, sky subtraction is a really big deal. And you'll see some of that coming up later, what the sky looks like in the near infrared. So we're hoping, that's why we ended up with such a funny shaped sky bundle. It was so that we had fibers along the slit, that sky fibers that would match the telecentricity of the optic fibers. All right, so our IFU is ideally sized for studies of nearby galaxies. And so this is just a comparison with the SDSS MANGA survey IFUs. They had a number of different sized IFUs designed to sample different nearby galaxies. And this is kind of an approximate overlay of what ours will look like compared to theirs. We have smaller fibers. Ours are 1.3 arc seconds. Theirs were 2 arc seconds, and we have more fibers, 212 in our bundles. So I'm really excited about using this infrared IFU to match up to optical IFU data on galaxies to look for outflows and galaxy evolution, AGN influences on galaxies and things like that. I think this will be a really powerful tool for those kinds of studies. All right, now I'll move into the predicted performance, the thing that people are probably most interested in. So I've developed an instrument simulator, and one of the big things I alluded to earlier was the infrared night sky. So this is a plot of a high resolution spectrum of the night sky from Mauna Kea. So you can see it is filled with bright OH emission lines, and of course these add noise to your observations. These lines are variable on order of about 10 minutes. So most infrared instruments limit their maximum exposure time to about 10 minutes, and then you just do multiple exposures to build up the time that you need on target. This spectrum has been smoothed to our NIR resolution, which changes with wavelength, as I showed you before. And then this is input into the instrument simulator. And I've also fit the continuum, which is the orange line here, because if you have sufficient spectral resolution, you can spread out those lines enough that you have some continuum in between there. And if your spectral feature falls in between the emission lines, then you can get a lot better signal to noise. So both of those are analyzed in the predicted performance, both the continuum level and the average sky level. The instrument throughput, of course, is another thing that goes into the simulation. On the left here is a plot of different components of our instrument. The fiber table is the red curve here, and that is actual measured data in the lab. The average fiber is about 81% total throughput. The purple here is our diffraction grating. Because we only have one grating, our throughput is kind of limited by that on the ends of the spectrum because the grating efficiency is falling off there. If we do fill out the entire grating suite, then that efficiency would certainly go up on the ends of the spectral range. And then we end up with the black curve here at the bottom with the total instrument throughput, including telescope. And then on the right, I'm showing the top of the atmosphere transmission. So it's just multiplying this by the atmospheric transmission. And then I've overlaid our grading settings to cover the full range here. So this range of extreme atmospheric absorption is between the J and H band. So if we exclude that, because you're not going to get a lot of signal out of that, then you can cover the entire spectral range in 6 separate grading setups. All right, and here is predicted signal to noise performance. So on the right here, I have plots of the mean signal to noise per resolution element as a function of object magnitude. So the different colors here are for the different grading settings, the different wavelengths, center wavelengths that you get with the different grading angles. And so these magnitudes are J band for wavelengths less than 1400 nanometers and H band for above 1400 nanometers. And then if you take these and you say, okay, if I want a signal to noise of 5 for an 1800 second exposure, excuse me, then this would be the limiting magnitude for that. So it ranges between 21 and 22, depending on the wavelength range. On the right here, the left column is for the sky continuum and the right column is for just kind of the average sky emission. So if your feature falls in between the sky emission lines, these are the numbers, as well as the plot on the left here. Right, and then this is just a zoom in of how bad it looks with considering the sky. So these are signal to noise per resolution element again, but just showing the details of each spectral range. So you can see there, there are a lot of regions where you can get down to the continuum, but there will be regions where the sky lines just wipe out. And this is nothing to do with our instrument. It's just the near-infrared night sky. Every near-infrared instrument has this issue, but it's just something that you'll need to consider when doing setups. We have the resolution of our grading angles is 1/2 degree. So it's a little bit better resolution than RSS. I think it's 0.75 degrees. So you can tweak your setups a little bit to try to get the spectral features that are most important, outside of night sky emission lines. Here's just some examples of data from the instrument. These were taken here at SAAO. again, with our test and integration cable, the real fiber cable is not installed yet. So we have a continuum on the left and a Krypton arc lamp on the right. Matt Brashady has analyzed these kinds of data for scattered light, looking at the profiles, and it's pretty good. It's about 1% in the wings of the profile. So SALT is developing a data pipeline that will take, we are responsible for combining the multiple reads into a single image, and we feed that into the SALT pipeline. And Enrico Cosse is working on this. And this is an example of his automatic skyline or wavelength identification. And the black is the observed arc spectrum, and the red is an artificial spectrum he's generated from the NIST line list. And then the dashed vertical lines are the lines that were identified, and he's reaching RMS of about 0.21 nanometers, I assume. So pretty good for, the spectral resolution element is much higher than that. So he's making a lot of good progress on the pipeline. All right, current status. So the instrument structure and the enclosure was sent by ship and arrived here at SALT on May 6th. The optics and detector were airshipped and arrived a little bit later on the 17th of May. The SPECTROGRAPH enclosure and instrument is all fully installed, and we've successfully tested at operating temperature -40. We've taken spectra with our test cable, and we're still tweaking in the optical alignment and should have that in another iteration or two. The fiber cable is complete and it is waiting on a plane to fly here from Chicago. We're expecting it to arrive next week, and then we will install it on the telescope, which will be another adventure. Yesterday, we did a test of this. So the tech ops guys got 50 meters, 4 50-meter long hoses that are exactly the same size as those conduits that contain our fibers. They're lashed together by clamps every couple meters or so. And so we did a test of this installation where we stuffed it up through the pintle bearing in the spectrograph room. It came up through the telescope over to the side, and we had ropes attached and hoisted it up to the top. And here you can see it going up and up to attached to the tracker carriage, and then it goes up and for another attachment, kind of loops around the RSS. And we learned a lot in the process, and we're going to modify a few things for the real fiber cable, which will probably be installed next week. So that was pretty exciting yesterday. So if all goes well with the cable installation, well, first the cable arrival, we've been having a lot of shipping issues. The pandemic has really messed up the world, and we're still having shipping issues due to that. But if all goes well, it gets here and we get it installed, then it's possible we'll actually go on sky for first light by July 7th. This will not be to collect any science data. It will just be to kind of test the telescope instrument interfaces, make sure we can acquire a star with the FIF, get it onto the fiber bundle, get light down to the spectrograph, get a spectrum, have the observatory, software to do all this, and the spectrograph working together. That may happen on July 7th. Then the Wisconsin team leaves on July 9th. We're going to go attend the SPIE conference in Montreal and have a little break. I'm on day 32 or something now. So that'll be nice. And then we're planning to come back for, some of us will come back for on-sky science commissioning beginning at the end of August. So that's kind of the status. I just wanted to do a shout out to the instrument team. So I'm the PI, Matt Brashady, in charge of fiber systems, and he's our WASHBURN Labs director, which is the instrumentation group at Wisconsin. Mike Smith is our optomechanical engineer. Kurt Janing is the systems engineer. He works on electronics, the electrical systems and vacuum systems and nearly everything. Jeff Percival's our software scientist. We have a machinist who's a new hire. I don't actually have a photo of him. Sam Gavalt was the electronics technician, and Don Mahalski, who passed away a couple of years ago, was the electrical engineer who worked on the project in the beginning. And then Joshua Opper needs a round of standing applause, who he almost single-handedly built this entire fiber cable. And Katie and Brianna, his two undergraduates, who've done a lot of assistance in constructing the cable. So I will end there. This is just a picture from when Petri and Kearney came out a couple of weeks ago to meet the instrument. So I can take questions.
Thanks, Marsha. Yeah, so I can already see some questions coming up. The first question from Patricia. Nice talk, thanks. You calculated the background using the data from Mauna Kea, but the background from Sutherland will be vastly higher, wetter, won't it? And absorption, particularly between J and H, much higher.
Yeah, so we don't have a spectrum from Sutherland. Because the instrument was designed with the Mauna Kea background in mind, I think that will the instrument should be able to, get down to the sky continuum. If it's higher here at Sutherland, then that will certainly affect the limiting magnitude calculations, and we just don't know that. So we did the best we could with what we had.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. People might want to ask directly. Vanessa?
Thanks. Thank you, Marsha. I think I've snuck in ahead of John there, but I just don't understand the configuration of the fibers. Can you move the sky fiber bundle relative to the object fiber bundle?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Try to get back to, okay. So yeah, this shows the FIF. So the jaws in the FIF move, and the IFU is mounted in one jaw and the sky bundle is mounted in the other jaw. And as it separates, then you increase the separation between the two.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
John?
Thanks, Marsha. Congratulations. This is just an incredible effort, and congratulations to your whole team.
Thank you.
I'm just sitting here in awe of looking at these mechanisms and what all you must have been through, even getting Matt to interfere a little bit as well. So that's it's just really an amazing accomplishment. So kudos to all of you. And I say that as the first person who tried to derail your astronomical career 20 years ago. But my simple question is, we still seem to be struggling with this at McDonald. How did you polish the fibers? Did you have a machine, or did you do that by hand? Or this seems to be a perennial problem for people.
Yeah, we had a machine. I didn't have a picture of it, but I might be able to find one. It's a spinning disc, and Matt might want to chime in here. He built a special holder for the fibers that has a pressure sensor, and so it allows you to tell how hard you're pushing down on the fibers. And Sabyasachi was at Wisconsin when we first did this, and he worked a lot on developing the process for like how much pressure you needed at different stages of different grits.
Right.
And I'm trying to look for a picture as I talk. I don't know if I can do two things at once. All right.
It's just
So yeah, the answer was we had a machine that did it, and we developed the whole process for how to polish through the different grit paper.
It's excessively finer grit, so you can move it down to because just what is it? 1.3 arc seconds is a fiber on the sky, so
it's a 300 micron core fiber.
Yeah.
I don't think I can find a picture. I'll have to send you one.
No trouble. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So we have another question in the chat from Catherine. Question is, could you say a little more about signs that can be tackled?
Yeah, so the one thing I'm very interested in, I can talk about that because that's what I've been thinking about or trying to think about, is there are some in the near-infrared, there are some lines that can tell you a lot about shocks in a galaxy. And so I'm very interested in how the AGN has affected the star formation in the galaxy, like have outflows from that, truncated star formation and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping to study AGN and look at the host galaxies of them to look for shocks that would indicate outflows from AGN that might have truncated star formation. So there are some iron lines right around 1.6 microns, and those are good for shock indicators. Those are also of interest to people who do supernovae. They like to observe these same iron lines. And there are also some of the Paschen hydrogen lines can tell you stuff about the very youngest stellar populations. So if you do stellar population synthesis modeling from optical spectra, sometimes it's hard to nail down the youngest populations, and that's largely due to the fact that we don't have stars, stellar spectra that go into these models always for the youngest stars, and depending on which model set you use, of course. But there are some lines in the near infrared that if they are there, then they can indicate very young stellar populations, like 4 megayears or something like that. So those are the kinds of things that I'm certainly interested in. This is we also cover for stellar astronomy, we cover exactly the region that the SDSS apogee survey picked for studying stars. There are a lot of, it's a very full region of information for stellar observations too. And I'm sorry, I don't know a lot about that type of astronomy, but I know that's of interest to stellar astronomers as well.
Okay. So we have another question. Sunil, you might want to speak.
Yeah, thanks. It was really very nice talk, Marsha. I want to know, like, do we have capabilities to get some signatures of, say, emission lines from torus in AGNs?
From what type of AGN?
From the torus of AGNs.
The torus. Well, so our fibers are fairly large. I'm not sure, that's a very small spatial scale. And some IFUs that are fed by adaptive optics target that kind of thing. I'm not sure if we'll be washing it out, signatures from the torus because we're looking over such a large region.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I mean, if you're looking at galaxies that are, a redshift of 0.1 or less, then the fiber is going to be maybe a kiloparsec. I don't know. So I don't know if you would be able to see stuff from the torus.
Okay, if you allow me, I want to add another question to this.
Yeah.
So, for example, in case of one of the this cluster, Perseus cluster, we have a AGN sitting at the center and like NGC 1275, and we actually get a lot of signatures in X-rays about hot gas from AGN. So, is it possible to see differentiate these signatures in IR also? I'm really very kind of naive in IR. So
I don't know. I've more looked into the host galaxy stuff, and I don't know what lines from the AGN actually fall in the near infrared. So I don't think I can answer that very well.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, Sunil. Anybody else have questions? I don't see anything on the chat yet. Nothing from speakers directly. Okay, so if not, let's give Marsha a virtual round of applause. Thanks, Marsha. It was a really exciting talk, and if I personally myself I'm very excited to have this instrument commissioned and use it if possible, hopefully. Thanks everyone.
Great, thank you
for
all.
joining. So we'll conclude here.